The DevOps Foundation Course, Lesson 6, DevOps Culture.
Welcome to Lesson 6. In this lesson, we're going to look at some cultural considerations for DevOps, including understanding organizational culture, cultural debt, DevOps culture, and managing cultural change. Resistance to change and new ways of working has been the downfall of many process improvement initiatives. In this lesson, we'll give you some tools for success.
Let's start by thinking about an organization's culture and what it means. Organizational culture is the behavior of humans within an organization and the meaning people attach to those behaviors. It's essential we understand our culture when we plan to make changes because we need to understand how significant the impact of the change will be. Think about an example of a toxic culture. An organization where people gossip, backstab, finger-point, and hoard information. Adopting DevOps practices here is going to be a big challenge, and the culture will need to be transformed. Alternatively, if an organization already works in a high-trust environment and is used to sharing information, then DevOps practices will be less disruptive. Culture can enable continuous improvement, or it can be a source of resistance. Culture is the way we do things in an organization, and changing the way we do things can leave people feeling scared, uncomfortable, and angry. Think about your own organization culture. If you were to start bringing in DevOps practices tomorrow, how much of a change would that be? Would you need to address any cultural issues first? Every organization has its own unique culture. Culture includes the organization's vision, values, norms, systems, symbols, languages, assumptions, beliefs, and habits. Culture is expressed in many ways, including how an organization conducts business, how an organization treats its employees, customers, and the wider community, freedoms allowed in decision-making, developing new ideas, and personal expression, how power and information flow through the organization's hierarchy, and how committed employees are towards collective objectives. Culture might be documented, well understood, and clearly communicated. Alternatively, it might be poorly understood and vague. Sometimes an organization might say it has one type of culture and then behave in a completely different way. Let's think about this with a quick exercise. Plan to spend about 15 minutes on this. Think about your own organization or a well-known company. Make some notes about its culture. What evidence do you have for your beliefs about its culture? How much would its culture need to change in order to adopt DevOps practices? We'll provide some suggestions in your exercise solutions document. A key concept for cultural analysis is the idea of cultural debt. This happens when cultural considerations are disregarded or deferred in favor of growth and innovation, often the net effect of IT's organizational silos. For example, an organization might be divided into teams based on skills or applications. Each team is managed differently, has its own practices and tools, and does not interface often with other teams. Communicating and collaborating with these silos is often difficult and frustrating, resulting in a lack of trust and unnecessary bottlenecks. This cultural debt will at some point need to be addressed. DevOps can pay down cultural debt by focusing on creating a trust relationship that includes human and technical interactions. All of the areas you can see on screen here can create cultural debt. How many of these have you experienced in your career? You can see where DevOps practices might start to break down cultural debt. For example, non-existent feedback loops create cultural debt. The DevOps second way, feedback, would help to address this area. For IT, cultural debt will have severe consequences. Projects and flow might suffer because of extensive silos, workflow constraints, and a lack of collaboration. Communication will be poor and might lead to miscommunication and errors. Ultimately, IT will see project delays, waste, and additional cost, the opposite of the outcomes we want to achieve. You can see a quote from Peter Drucker here. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker was a management consultant whose work contributed to the philosophical and practical foundations of the modern business corporation. He invented management by objective. In this quote, Drucker is arguing that when an organization tries to adopt a strategy that is incompatible with its culture, culture will win and the strategy will fail. Culture can change, but it takes time, patience, and vision. IT is a community or society. Like any society, it's multicultural and prone to fragmentation. You can see some of IT's cultural groupings on screen here. Groups might be aligned to a tool, a methodology, or a framework. Each group has its loyal fans and its detractors. Really, we need to try and blend these groups and take a more holistic view. For example, just because we use ITIL doesn't mean we can't use Agile or Lean practices too. Each IT group will have its own messages, and some of them are very loud. You can see some examples here on screen. As groups get bigger, they might even start arguing internally and split to create smaller groups. IT staff might have to choose to ignore all the noise or listen only to messages from trusted sources. Ultimately, each organization needs to understand and adapt the tools, methods, and frameworks that will help them meet their goals and deliver value to the customers. Here's a quote from Sasha Bates, Professional Services Consultant. Tools and processes are a reflection of your cultural choices. Think about what this means. Organizations that are process-bound and bureaucratic in nature will choose process-heavy, bureaucratic ways of working. Organizations that are already open and high-trust are likely to embrace high-trust ways of working. This is why it's so important to understand where we are starting from and how it might influence our choices. On screen, you can see some characteristics of a DevOps culture. Are any of these surprising to you? Shared goals, visions, and incentives are essential for DevOps to help break down silos and improve integration and collaboration. The culture needs to create a safe environment with high trust and a learning culture. People need to feel free to speak up. For example, during blameless postmortems that focus on what went wrong, not who messed up. Some companies reward teams that support learning and improvement. This sends a strong cultural message about the sort of behavior that is welcomed and encouraged. Real culture change takes time. It must be incremental and performed at a realistic pace. One common analogy that's used is the start of a big race like a marathon. The manager knows what they want to do, and they are off, sprinting down the road. All of the staff don't have the message yet, and they are milling around on the start line wondering when and where to go. IT needs to transform its behavior. Drag and drop the opposite words into the to column to see where we need to change. For example, from reactive to proactive. Click Submit to see how you did.